Awesome. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're coming from. I will just quickly introduce myself. My name is Jordan. I'm a product manager here on Microsoft Entra's team. And for the past about 2.5 years, I've been focused on conditional access all up, and recently mostly focused on the conditional access optimization agent, which is what we're here to discuss today. So let's just talk a little bit. Hopefully everyone has a context of what conditional access is, and you all have some experience managing it. And if you do have experience managing it, you know it's quite challenging. Conditional access is a really powerful tool, but it's really hard to get right. Okay, sorry. And but it's important to get right. And the thing that's particularly challenging is there's constant change that conditional access has to keep up with. So that's one of the reasons that we built this agent, was to help kind of catch this change, keep your conditional access policies up to date. So again, just to emphasize, what is the exact point of this agent? What are we trying to solve? What we hear from our customers is that it's really challenging to know if your conditional access policies are actually enforcing the security posture that you want them to. There's temporary and permanent exceptions that need to be accounted for. There's new users and applications and agent IDs that are being added constantly to your organization. There's movement, and all of those things have an impact on your conditional access policies. And knowing what that impact is can be quite challenging. So the solution is the conditional access agent. We'll dive into this in a little bit more detail, but it scans your environment daily, or even more frequently sometimes, to look for gaps in your CA policies. Specifically, it looks to see if new users and new applications are causing a gap. So an example might be, Jordan, was added to a tenant, and when I was added to it, I wasn't added to the right MFA or device compliance conditional access policies. That would be a hard thing for a human to track every day, but the agent seamlessly catches that gap and helps you solve the problem by recommending which policy to add me to. So we just covered this first one. What does that agent actually do? It autonomously identifies security gaps before attackers do. The first example is a new user is missing coverage from critical policies. It does the same for applications and agent IDs. It also looks to see if you have any conditional access policies unintentionally causing impact to your end users and their ability to sign in. It looks to your Intune configuration and your global secure access configuration as well, to make sure that it's staying up to date with those configurations and enforcing them properly, and a whole lot more. So the idea is there are a number of different gaps it looks for, and it helps you close those gaps. The second one, and this is quite cool, is it learns from the feedback of you as you're using it. So if you edit things along the way, if you tell it, like, this phase rollout recommendation is good, but not great, here's how it could be great. Oops, there must be a timer on that slide, apologies. It learns from that feedback. You can also give it your own personal business information, like, these are my break glass accounts that I use to make sure that there's never a tenant-wide blockout, or this is how I structure my conditional access policies. Take this into account when deciding when to add users to policies. So it's constantly getting better. The more you use it, the more you interact with it, and learning from the input and feedback from the user. And then, of course, we know that agents are relatively new, and we're all gaining trust with them in different parts of our lives, work being a huge one. So we wanted to make it as transparent and explainable as possible. So the agent, with every single recommendation, there's a natural language summary of why it thinks there's a gap, the logic, it's in exploration, it's done, what the solution is and why we're recommending it. And there's also what we call this timer is going to kill me, a node map, which walks you through every single step that the agent takes. So we will cover all of that in the demo. So again, I think this just hits home what we've already discussed. It's constantly looking for those security gaps, something that that requires automation, right? Humans simply can't keep up with the frequent changes. You see here that it runs every 24 hours, and you can also run it manually whenever you need. And then the gaps, fixing gaps with one click. We've talked about how it identifies those gaps and proposes solutions such as adding users to a policy, rolling out a new policy, updating the exclusions from an existing policy. But it actually does this, what you can accomplish this with a single click now. So the agent explains, it shows you in JSON exactly what change it wants to make. And then if you approve, you can accept it with one click and the agent will make the change based on your approval. Okay, and I think this is the last slide before we get to the demo, but I really like this slide. I encourage folks to take a screenshot or if you can. I think it just really nicely captures all of the information that the agent is intaking and outputting. So here on the left, you can see agent knowledge sources. These are all of the things that the agent looks for when considering your gaps, and you can see it's quite vast and comprehensive. Of course, it's looking at some basic stuff like what are your conditional access policies, what are the groups used in them, if they're assigned to certain roles, all of that information. And of course, it also looks at audit logs and sign-in logs. What are the changes happening? Who's making them? When have they happened? What's the impact of them? But it's also looking for, like we talked about, those custom business rules and admin feedback. So there's multiple ways that you can give the agent direct feedback and times that it's inferring stuff based on indirect feedback, like edits that you make. It also, if you have P2 in your tenant, so if you're using identity protection with conditional access, it looks at that, it knows that, and it uses that risk level information to give you better insights. And then the bottom two we talked about quickly, but this is Intune, reading from Intune and Global Secure Access. So the goal here is we know that conditional access doesn't operate in a silo, right? It's very interconnected with your Entra configuration and configurations outside of Entra. And those are also hard relationships or partnerships to manage. So the agent is helping you do that. So it looks at Intune, for example, and sees what your device compliance policies are. And let's just pretend you have a device compliance policy configured in Intune that applies to all full-time employees. That's great that you have that configured in Intune, but that's just the first step, because until you enforce it with conditional access, you're not actually gaining any real security posture improvement. So the agent is reading your Intune configuration daily and looking to see if you have the right CA policies set up to enforce those Intune policies. And if you don't, it will suggest the exact conditional access policy that you need. And it does the same for global secure access. And then I'm going to jump to the top of this slide. Can you guys see my cursor? You can. Yeah, here, the Microsoft Entra Agent ID. This was new at Ignite, so back in November. Hopefully everyone here is familiar with agent IDs. As we know, agents are popping up left and right in everyone's organization. And we introduced Agent ID at Ignite, which is the new identity of agents, essentially, and it enables you to manage them and secure them just like you do other objects in your tenant, like applications, service principals, users, etc. And so, of course, the agent is aware of that as well, and it looks to see, are the right conditional access policies applied to your agent IDs, and if not, it helps you configure those. So again, I think I just talked for like 3 minutes solely about all the input that the agent is given and receives and considers. And then this is where the magic of the agent comes in. It applies that continuous learning from you. It applies its dynamic reasoning and its autonomous operation. And all that results in a set of tailored recommendations specific to your organization. So a few of these would be policy improvements, not just for agents, but for applications and users. These policy improvements, like we said, could be about increasing the coverage of existing policies. So say you have an MFA policy, but it's not covering a certain set of users, something of that nature. The agent's going to catch that and help you improve the coverage of that MFA policy. It also, the second one down, or the third one, the deep analysis on policy configuration. This is where the agent is looking to see, can you better improve your conditional access policies? Specifically, are their exclusions managed properly? So one would be, do they have break glass accounts excluded? Break glass accounts are critical because if you don't have them excluded and managed properly, you risk tenant-wide lockout. So the agent identifies when break glass accounts aren't properly excluded and helps you change those policies so they are. And then on the flip side, the agent also looks for policies that are widely ineffective because they have too many exclusions. So imagine you have an all users policy, but you've excluded all employees or all full-time employees and part-time employees. So the only people left are like some stragglers, right? The agent's going to help you catch that and recommend removing those exclusions. And then one more on policy configuration is merging policies. This is something that we hear a lot from customers, which is we've created a bunch of policies to accommodate for certain scenarios, and we aren't sure if they can be joined together. And we want to merge them for easier management and configuration, right? But we don't know if that's possible. So the agent is always looking at all of your enabled policies and determining, can any of them be consolidated while maintaining that same security posture? So it's never going to recommend a reduction in your security posture, but it will help you maintain it with less policies, meaning just there's less overhead, less risk for manual errors, etc. Okay, going down phased rollout planning. This one is really, really cool. We know that turning on a new policy is simply not easy. It has a lot of impact to cause, it has a lot of potential, I guess, to cause impact to end users and disrupt the everyday business. So phased rollout is what we've learned from customers that they do, but it's very challenging to achieve, which is to turn on policies in stages. And those stages need to be thoughtful, they need to be increasing in size, increasing potential impact, and they also need to be monitored. So that's exactly what the agent does. Whenever it thinks you need to turn on a new policy, it will recommend which groups to use for each phase. And you can edit that, and that's where the agent learns from you. If you edit those groups to use, it will remember that for the next time. And then once you start, it will slowly work its way through those groups until it gets to 100%, and it will keep you informed along the way. So it will tell you, okay, pilot group went well. It's been 1 week. We saw 95% sign-in successful based on this policy. You're ready to move to phase two. And then at phase two, it might say, oh, we thought it was only going to be, 5% failed sign-ins, but it was actually 20. We recommend rolling back and investigating. So it does a lot of that homework for you and helps that rollout process be as seamless as possible. Okay, a few other things. ServiceNow integration. If you do use ServiceNow for change management, this is built right into the agent. All you have to do is configure the plugin, and then it will create ServiceNow tickets every time it's recommending a change to make that change management as simple as possible. We already talked about this next one. This is policies with an increase in failed sign-ins. The agent's always looking to see what policies impacts are. And if there is a high impact, it generates a root cause report. So this will be in the demo, so I won't drain it too much now, but really cool for understanding how your CA policies are impacting end users and having a good, touch on it without having to wait for support cases to increase with your support desk. And then conversational editing, of course, we're all very comfortable now interacting with AI via chat interface, and the agent supports this as well. So you can ask the chat anything related to the agent. Why did you recommend this? I want more detail. Can you make this change to the recommendation? Those sorts of questions. Where should I start? I see 12 recommendations. All those kinds of questions, and the agent will, casually talk to you and help you get the information that you need. Okay, awesome. Thank you for bearing with me. I know this is a lot of information. I think the meta here is that the agent is doing a lot on a daily basis. And I think you can imagine just from listening to this list that this would be hard for a human to do on any given day. And it gives you a lot of insights that would otherwise be much more challenging to get. And this is my last slide before the demo. So this is really cool. And see this link down at the bottom if anyone wants to go see all of the details, but we conducted a study where we gave 200 admins a list of conditional access related tasks. So these are things like find two policies that can be merged together, or identify a missing baseline policy from this tenant, things like that. And 100 of those admins had the CA optimization agent available to them. 100 did not, but they had whatever other tools they wanted. They could use a regular Copilot chat embedded in Entra. They could use any external AI tools, Google, whatever. And what we saw was that regardless of the tools that the other admins were using, admins with the agent were both faster and more accurate. So you can see here across all of the tasks, they were 43% faster and 48% more accurate. Specifically, when it came to merging those policies, finding similar policies and consolidating, 60% faster. And then this one is huge. It's simply identifying a missing policy. They were 204% more accurate with the agent. So again, I just think these are the proof is in the pudding. The agent is really helping customers where they need it, and helping on both speed but also accuracy, which we know is critical, again, for gaining that trust with the agent. Okay, awesome. I'm just going to pull over my demo environment. It's quite zoomed in, just hopefully everyone can see it well. So please let me know if you're having any issues seeing it. But yeah, let's just dive in. This is the CA optimization agent. You get to it by coming to the Enter Admin Center, coming to our Security Copilot Agents library, and then clicking on Conditional Access Optimization Agent. I won't demo install today, but install is a simple click. It's just one click and the agent is installed. I do want to note one thing. There's a single thing that you can configure before you install the agent, which is this capability right here, giving the agent is allowed to create report-only policy modes, report-only policies autonomously. So for folks in the call who aren't familiar with report-only, there are 3 states that a CA policy can be in. It can be enabled, which means it is having the impact that you expect it to, right? It's actually requiring MFA, it's actually blocking risky users, whatever it might be. It can be disabled, which means it's doing nothing, or it can be in this report-only mode, which is really cool. It allows you to basically simulate the impact of a conditional access policy, measure the impact on real life sign-ins without actually doing it. So when I sign into a policy and there's a report-only mode that is requiring a compliant device, for example, from me, my experience is the same. I get to sign in regardless, but in sign-in logs, we capture whether or not that sign-in would have been successful if the policy was turned on. Really, really cool tool. I encourage folks to learn more about report-only mode if they're not familiar with it. But with that said, because report-only mode policies do not have impact to end users, we felt confident that the agent could create these policies autonomously. So essentially what happens, again, the agent is always looking for gaps. If it deems that there is a gap that requires a net new policy, it will automatically just create that in report-only mode and then inform you about it and say, monitor the impact and eventually roll it out with phased rollout. But some customers still have very, very strict change management rules, and this isn't okay, even though it's low impact, there's a process they need to follow. So this is a capability that you can turn off. And the reason I'm spending time here is because we know this is a blocker for some customers. We highly encourage keeping it on if that's allowed in your organization, but if it's not for any reason, you can turn it off, and then the agent will just recommend creation of these policies instead, just giving you more control, the ability to plug into your change management processes and stuff like that. Cool. Okay, so once the agent is turned on, this is what happens. We'll come back to settings a bit later. But the agent runs and it looks for gaps and it recommends, it gives you a set of recommendations to close those gaps. So all of the recent recommendations will be here. We can see the last run was on, oh, this looks like a bug maybe. We can see that we are getting updates as of, what was it, yesterday. And that it was creating recommendations, and every recommendation can be clicked into and reviewed in more detail. So this is one of the ones I said we would demo, review an increase in failed sign-ins. So when you click review suggestion, this is where you see that natural language summary. So all of this is generated by the LLM, and it's explaining exactly what it found based on all the LLM reasoning in natural language. So I'm going to show what happens when we click review report. This root cause analysis, this is for this particular recommendation, is generated. So again, we have more detail in natural language. We're seeing the information here. What was the increase of failed sign-ins? Clearly, this is quite small, and it's likely because this policy is applied to very few users, and just a few failed sign-ins would cause quite the spike. So you can see here visually, right? No impact, 11 failed sign-ins. Bear with me, this is a test tenant, so probably someone was testing something and it worked. But as you start to scroll down, you can see more natural language, root cause analysis, who was the user that was being blocked and why. Sorry, it's scrolling slow. You can click this to see the user so you can investigate if you need to, what it thinks the issue might be. The password change requirement was not satisfied. So it's quite simple to understand. It also tells you non-factors, like device compliance wasn't an issue, network location was not the cause. So I think this is helpful to get started on investigating these sorts of scenarios, because you know those are paths you don't need to go down. And then for this particular scenario, it gives you potential next steps. We know that addressing these kind of scenarios is very unique to each organization. So instead of a simple review, we recommend communicating to end users, roll new policies out if you need, and of course, only in absolutely critical scenarios, adding a temporary exclusion for this user. Okay. So that's just one type of recommendation. And there's one other thing I want to show before we dive into others. We have this cool link right here. It's called View Agent Activity. You can see it here as well. There's a few different places to click on it. And when you do, it's going to walk you through every single step that the agent took on that particular run. So once again, natural language summary, the agent ran on this date. It reviewed 84 CA policies. It found new users unprotected, but no new applications. So it gives you that. But then it gives you this really cool node map. And oh, it is fully zoomed out. Basically, you see tenant analysis started, and then you see every single step that it took. So one of the things it did was look for new applications. And like we learned, there are new recommendations for this policy. It also looked for users and found 7 users not in scope. It looked and it said there's no possibility to merge, there's no policies to roll out, etc. But again, I'm just wanting to emphasize this is all about getting visibility into the agent's logic, thinking, decision-making process, etc. So it hopefully gives you a lot more confidence to trust the recommendations. We know customers really like this. It's getting quite big because the agent is doing a lot, but I highly recommend if you ever install the agent to come to this view to start getting comfortable with it and what it's doing. Okay, awesome. Let's dive into the recommendations a bit more. These are the most recent ones. Clearly, this tenant has a lot of activity and failed sign-ins, but this is a cool one. Review policy with no break glass accounts. So here we can see this policy is missing break glass accounts, which means it has the potential to cause tenant-wide lockout. So this flags this issue. This is obviously a critical thing to address, and then you can simply address it right in line. So you can say Aaron needs to be the one to be excluded. I won't actually do it here, and exclude him. You could add groups, rules, etc. But again, it's just making this quite simple because you can imagine if this tenant has 84 enabled policies, auditing them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis would be quite challenging to make sure that they all have the proper exclusions. Okay. So here we go. This is a cool one. Turn on new policy to enforce device compliance for Linux. So this was that Intune scenario that I talked about. The agent actually went and read the Intune configuration, and it saw that there was an Intune policy, and it applies to this exact group. So now it's helping you create the right CA policy to enforce that. And one thing I want to show, it also links you to Intune if you need. But we have this really cool diff viewer. So whether we're updating an existing policy or if we are creating a new one, it gives you the information in as many views as possible and kind of highlights the difference. So here we see, like I mentioned, the agent automatically created this policy in report only mode. And now it's recommending that we turn it on. This is this recommendation. So what's cool is you can come to this diff viewer, this JSON view, especially if you're familiar with JSON and prefer it, and see exactly which change. So you can see all of the policy details here, who it applies to, etc., what the exclusions are, and then you can see what the change is. So here it's quite a simple change. I prefer the side-by-side view. So you can see this is the existing state. This is what they want to change it to. This is quite simple. You can imagine if we're adding groups and users and updating exclusions, etc., that this might be a little bit more of a helpful view. But I do think it's quite cool for folks who are comfortable with JSON. You can also download this, which we know is a popular request as well. And this is for every recommendation to update or create a new policy. Okay, let's see. Are there any other? We've already done break glass accounts, increase in failed sign-ins, and the Intune scenario. Is there anything else in this test tenant? I think those are the different types of recommendations here. So I want to dive into the settings for the agent. Um, a few things that we didn't discuss. You can configure Teams notifications. So this is quite simple. Again, you just need a quick plugin, and then you can get notifications from the agent whenever it finds anything new. So all you will get is a message that the agent has new findings. Please look at the agent in Entra to see more details. The reason we don't give you the details directly in Teams is for security purposes. Perhaps you have different requirements for accessing Teams than you do the Entra Admin Center. In fact, hopefully you do have different requirements. So we don't want to give you any information about potential gaps. Unless it is in a secure environment, which is Entra. But again, very cool. You can pick exactly who gets these notifications, and you'll only get bothered if there is something new to report on. Okay, and then we've already talked about ServiceNow, but again, I'll just highlight this. This is where you can configure ServiceNow. And then what you'll see is once ServiceNow is configured on every single one of those recommendations, there will be a link to the specific tenant so you can easily open up ServiceNow. I'm going to come to this last because I think it's the most exciting. So one more thing, this is the permissions tab and nothing to configure here, but I want to emphasize agent ID. Not only is the agent recommending policies for agent IDs, but it's also operating as an agent ID itself. So this is huge because you can easily manage it as needed. You can manage the permissions it has, you can manage who has access to it, just like you would a service principal. So again, agent ID critical for managing agents going forward, and this agent is no different. It's installed by default with an agent ID, and then you can manage it as needed. Okay. Um, so last but not least, definitely not least, is what we call knowledge sources. So knowledge sources are the main way that the agent learns from you. There's two things. When we first shipped this agent to general availability, we gave it this custom instructions feature. And this is really cool. You can use natural language to give it insights and things to consider. So here's the example: exclude users and break glass group from any policy that requires MFA. So I don't know like the exact users in the tenant, but let's just say we want to exclude myself. I'd say ANBL77 at Wipro.ms is the break glass account. Exclude her from all policies. So again, natural language, I didn't have to go configure a JSON or write code or do any kind of automation. And the agent is able to understand that rule and save it and apply it going forward. Okay, so if this loads, might be a little bit slow right now. But again, this is just the first way that the agent can be start to understand your business context. Another really good example of what might be happening here or how you could use it. Oh, okay. Well, imagine I knew this tenant better and I had the right creds. But the other scenario you could say is like, okay, the agent keeps telling me to add users to this policy, but it's not going to work for my organization. So tell the agent to ignore that scenario, and then the agent won't continue. And then this one is really cool. So this is in public preview right now. So it is available by default when you get the tenant. Just note that we're still improving it and making changes. But this is what we're calling knowledge bases. So what it is we hear customers tell us, we have a lot of, quote unquote, tribal knowledge. We have likely written it down somewhere, given it to an employee to onboard at one point. And this is all information about conditional access policies. It's about how we name conditional access policies, who our break glass accounts are, how we structure them. Maybe we have a different set of requirements for admins than for guests, than for full-time employees and part-time employees. All of this is documented somewhere. How do we inform the agent about it? So that's what this feature is. You can upload a Word doc or a PDF with that information, and the agent will analyze it and kind of spit it back out to you. So it'll say, this is what I understood about your naming conventions, your break glass account scenarios, your persona-based strategy. Is this accurate? And then you can approve it, and then the agent's going to use that information going forward, which is really cool because essentially this is information about your business that we could not possibly extract from what is in Entra today, right? This is information that lives in your head on a piece of paper external to Entra, and it's critical for managing your CA policies, but it's not something that the agent is currently aware of. So this is the first step in really upping those recommendations from general best practices to best practices that work for me in my business. And then once this is uploaded, when you go back to your recommendations, if they were influenced by a knowledge base, it explains to you exactly how and why. So it will say, hey, we found these 5 users who are missing protection from MFA policy. You had 5 MFA policies. We had to pick the best one to add them to. And based on your knowledge base, we know, MFA policy 3 is the best one because these are full-time employees and that's a policy for full-time employees. So really, really cool. I think this is really a critical feature in making sure the agent is personalized to you. And that's why it's in preview right now. We're going to continue to improve it. So I highly encourage folks to start testing it out. All right. And let's see, I'm just looking if we had any questions that I can answer.
Yeah,
Agent
no, thanks. Are you kind of at the end of your demo?
Yes, I don't think there's much
Okay.
else. So is there any questions that
Yeah.
we
Uh,
had?
yeah, I've got some questions. Maybe we can expand on a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question that everybody hates answering, but from
Mhm.
your experience, what is the average SCU cost of running the agent?
I actually love that question, and I should have covered this. So down below, this is so zoomed in, down below the recent suggestions, we have this recent activity, and you can also see it here as well. And what you're seeing is every time the agent runs, you see how long it took, the SCUs that were consumed, the suggestions generated, etc. Mine, this is a little bit of a bug right now, since one thing to note is we merge recommendations. So instead of giving you 12 recommendations from 12 different days. If they're similar, we consolidate them, which isn't currently represented here. But what you're seeing here is SCU cost is quite low. And yes, this is a test tenant, but we know even in our largest of tenants, on like we've never seen a run over 2 to 3 SCUs, on average less than 1 SCU per run. So we've done our absolute best and we'll continue to keep this as cost effective as possible. And another thing I want to note, it's misleading because we've got a bug that we're fixing, but normally when there are 0 suggestions, we will not charge you. So if the agent doesn't find anything meaningful on a given run, we're not going to charge you SEUs because there was no value to add. So that's another reason to be running it daily. Like I said, in the settings, you can configure how often it runs every 24 hours. This is highly, highly recommended to get the most value out of it. You can also analyze it or analyze your tenant manually instead of having it run every 24 hours. So yes, that's the question on SEUs. We try to be as transparent as possible, and also we are striving to keep it as quote unquote affordable.
No, that's great. Appreciate that. Actually going to revisit a question that I answered in chat because after I
Mhm.
answered it, I started maybe thinking through this scenario and thinking maybe it is possible. And then you did cover the thing I wanted to talk about with the feedback to the agent. So somebody just asked me if it was possible to have the agent, rename or create the policies based on the customer's uh, conditional access policy naming convention.
Yes.
And my answer was that, what you can do is before you approve actions, you can edit it and, make sure that it's your thing. But then I
Yes.
started thinking about it. Is this feedback that you could give to the agent so that in the future, when it creates a policy, it automatically uses like some sort of naming convention?
Yep, I would say both are true. So one, let's go to recommendation, turn on a new policy. So what you guys see here is the agent created this policy in report only mode autonomously, and now it's saying review it and turn it on. So exactly what you said, like this is actually the agent, this is the policy itself, and you can quickly jump into this edit mode and change the policy name. So that's one solution for sure. But this is the exact sort of scenario that we built knowledge bases for. Let's see, it just takes a while to upload, but I can perhaps send a screenshot of what it looks like when you upload a file. Naming conventions is one of the things it looks for. So once you upload a file and it understands how you name your policies, 2 things happen. Every time the agent creates a policy from then on out, it will use that naming convention. The other thing it does, it scans for every single policy in your tenant and looks to see if any of them are misaligned. And if it does, identify like policies that are not aligned with your naming convention, it would generate a recommendation to suggest changing those. So it would be one single recommendation. The agent identified X policies with inaccurate names. Here's the recommended name based on the guidance you've given us. So yes, the answer is both work. You can edit
No,
directly or you can use that knowledge base feature.
that's great. I just, like I said, I just started second guessing myself after I answered it. So
Yeah. Well, it's a
it
new
was great to
feature,
see that
which is
clarification.
great. Yeah.
There,
Cool.
I have one. I have one question that was posted 26 minutes ago, and I couldn't think of a good answer for it. Can you expand on limitations? This is from someone named Ryan. We have 450,000 users, thousands of apps, about 80 CA policies. Documentation states it can review only 300 users and 150 apps in a single run. This seems problematic for our environments. Jordan, any
Yes.
comments on that?
Yes, I do. First off, thank you for being diligent in reading our documentation. It's there for a reason, so we appreciate it. The agent, when we first shipped it at GA, the agent was intended to find newly introduced gaps. So the reason it's intended to run every 24 hours is because it's looking to see every 24 hours what are the new gaps. And those limitations are based solely on it's evaluating up to, I can't remember the exact numbers Jeff just said, but like whatever it is, 150 applications, new applications per run. So it's looking at your audit logs, and if there's more than 150 applications or more than 300 users, I think are the numbers, it will stop at that in the past 24 hours. So if you're having more churn on a daily basis, which we don't think our customers are based on our internal telemetry on average. Of course, there's one-off scenarios like acquisitions and big hiring, like seasonal hiring sprees and stuff like that. But most of the time, we don't see more than 300 users and 150 applications. So it should cover those scenarios. But with that said, the short answer is those limitations are only for looking at the past 24 hours. The agent also does stuff that looks beyond those new users and applications. It just checks for all of those baseline policies. It just checks to see, do you have them or not? And if you don't have them, it helps you generate them for all of your users. Same with like those Intune scenarios. Like it's checking for that regardless of how many users you have in your tenant. So it's actually good feedback. We can try and make that a little bit clearer in the documentation. That limitation is just for when we're scanning newly added objects.
That's great. Thanks. Maybe one more question and then we can wrap up. And I thought it was an interesting one as well. What's the best way to give like a leadership team visibility into the reporting and the metrics on this agent without giving them the ability to like make changes?
Yeah. So there's a few things. There's this dashboard, which is something we will continue to invest in. But what you can see here is this is showing what are the gaps identified in the past 30 days from the agent. This is a test tenant. And so we haven't seen like add new users, but there were add new application recommendations. So it was saying, new apps have been discovered, they're out of scope. So this is one thing is if you just want to give some high level metrics, you can see 30 days, it's only used 8.25 SCUs. No one's acted on these recommendations yet, so there's no real gain yet. Hopefully you're acting and then this goes up. And then the unprotected apps and users will be personalized to your tenant, right? So this is one way. Another thing is we respect RBAC just like any other feature. So you can give people conditional access, like reader abilities, and they can come and review the recommendations without actually having the ability to like accept the recommendation. So that's something as well as just giving people read access by giving them, conditional access .read or some kind of security reader role or something like that.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's probably a good place to leave off. So we just want to thank everybody for showing up today. We hope that this session was full of information that you all found useful. I think it was for me as well. But thank you, Jordan and Jeff, for being our guest today and sharing all this great information. To everybody still on the line, if this is the kind of stuff that interests you, make sure you visit our page at aka.ms/securitycommunity, where you can sign up for plenty more sessions just like this. Thank you all again.